laughable. All right, so I mentioned before, although we're now a little bit out of order for historical reasons, but I wanted to give you sort of the full look at all the things that happen leading up to liturgy. And this is the first thing that happens when I arrive. In some senses, it is the beginning of liturgy, although I guess if you wanted to be very technical, there's one over there, I think. Yeah. I suppose you could make the argument that liturgy starts with, Vespers the evening before. But in terms of what we're actually doing Sunday morning, before proximity, which we've covered before, and before the liturgy, which we've now gone through, this needs to happen. So I'm actually going to start with something that's not in the handout, which is with entrance prayers, which is the very, very first thing. So upon entering the church, your clergy will go venerate the icons, and then standing before the gates, there's a set of prayers here called entrance prayers. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. It just starts with the Trisagion prayers, then it goes through. There's some of the evening prayers, if you've all looked through that. Have mercy on us, O Lord, have mercy on us for laying aside all excuse. We sinners offer to thee as to our master's supplication. Have mercy on us. It's the same thing that you are saying theoretically in your evening prayers if you're doing that anyway. And then there are particular prayers as we venerate the icons of Jesus and of the Theotokos on either side. We venerate the most pure image of good and ask forgiveness of our transgressions, O Christ our God, of the good will thou wast pleased to send the cross in the flesh, etc. And then for the Theotokos, make us worthy of mercy, of Theotokos, fount of tenderness, so on and so forth. So venerating both of those icons, usually the little ones, but if you're in a tradition that doesn't do that, then the big ones, because that's what's there. And then there's a prayer for the priest asking that the Our Lord, stretch forth thy hand from thy holy dwelling place on high, and strengthen me for this thine appointed service, that standing uncondemned before thy dread throne I may offer the blood of the sacrifice, for that is kingdom, so on. So, and then the last thing is actually entering the altar. There's a psalm here. I'll enter thy house, and I will worship toward thy holy temple in the fear of thee, O Lord. Lead me in thy righteousness because of mine enemies. Make my way straight before thee, for there is no truth in their mouth. It goes on for a little while. That's Psalm 5. Upon venerating the altar, turning on the lights, whatever else needs to happen in there, and the deacon, if there is a deacon, getting a blessing from the priest for entering the altar, because if you remember, entering that space requires a blessing, so you get the blessing every time. At that point, the next thing can happen, which is vesting. So I have laid out in a, maybe this is standard, I don't really know, way, for the priest vestments. These are, we'll go through each piece here in a moment. I forgot to grab. It's hanging up in the back. All right, it's fine. For the deacon's vestment, but that's okay. So this piece right here is the Stacarian. It's the first one, and I'm going to talk about it for a little bit of time, beyond even what it says here. So, I guess I'll give you my little intro thing here in case you can't read. So early in the church, vestments were not terribly well defined. If you see even some of the icons, you'll notice vestments can vary wildly, especially if you look at some of the very early icons of the deacons like we have on either side, Archdeacon Lawrence and Stephen, and there's a few others. You'll see that the vestments are similar, but they do look a little different to what deacons wear today. So that's because this inner garment, the Stacarian, is the sort of lowest rank for everything. And through history, it has actually changed a good bit. It, for most of its existence, has been very plain, like this. It's just a single cross in the back. At some point in time, people decided that they wanted the form of it worn by people that aren't putting other things on top of it, for whom it is basically the outer layer, for it to be fancy. So deacons and altar servers will wear this, but with the patterned fabric of the outer to match whatever color for the season that we're in. But technically speaking, it is this same very plain garment that they are wearing. You still see remnants of this in some of the non-Chalcedonian churches. If you ever have a chance on YouTube or something, or ever are invited to a service or something, you'll see that their deacons wear basically a plain white robe just like this, and they'll fix the thing to the side just like you see in the iconography. So in that regard, I guess it's been sort of preserved. But again, if you look at the deacons on either side, all the way to the far sides, yeah, mostly just a plain white robe with the orarion over the shoulder. As I say here, in 6th century, a civil fashion left liturgical garb behind. It became sort of its own thing, but originally this was not necessarily distinct from what people were wearing in general, although there certainly are elements of this that were different, one of them being the stole, which we'll talk more about its purpose in a little bit, but originally that was what denoted your rank, was how you wore your stole. If you did not have one at all, you were a reader or altar server or something low rank. Crossed in front would be a subdeacon, draped over the shoulder is a deacon, around the neck is a priest or bishop. And it was worn, I've seen references to it being worn all the time, right? It was part of your clothing that you would just wear every day. You'd go out and about and do your thing with your stole on to show. And there are a few, you can see a few icons that show, like, there's one of deacons serving in not a liturgical service, but in a ministerial role, and it shows like a whole bunch of these guys with the thing over the shoulder running around and like distributing food in an outside of a church scene. So today we really only wear these during the services for the most part, with a few very minor exceptions that are still services, but maybe not here. But back in the day, that wasn't probably the case. Through time, obviously, in the Jewish tradition, there was a very clear distinction between liturgical garb and like everyday wear, right? You weren't wearing what the high priest was wearing when he was serving as the high priest, right? It was a very different and distinct thing. It was defined in the Old Testament how it should be made, the materials that it should be made from, that kind of thing, right? So in that sense, I mean, we've preserved all of that, having a distinct set of vestments that's worn for churches. The quality of fabric is nice. These brocades are, they're not exactly easy to make. They can have like metal woven into them sometimes, so you'll actually see really old vestments sometimes that are actually made with real silver that will start to turn green. So anyway, there's that. We'll talk about the colors when we get to the end, so in case I'm triggering you thinking about colors, hold off until we get there. So yeah, around the 6th century we start to get sort of a very clear distinction between this is church stuff and this is like everyday stuff, and they're very different things. The last thing I want to call out before we get really going into this is just to point out, so this outer piece that you see me wear all the time is actually basically the same piece that you see worn in the Catholic Church this day, and almost any other very high liturgical church that has an outer garment of some form. I think it's usually called an alb. They have taken different ways to make your hands usable. Our way was to just bring the front up so that my hands can go out under the top. The Western way was to put slits down the side so your hands can go out the side. But that is why that garb is sort of the same but also different. So we didn't put any slits in it, we just raised up the front, but it's basically the same thing. Now, obviously something like the orarion or stole is shared amongst pretty much all, even Protestant churches. You'll see rainbow stoles around the minister's neck or whatever, so, right. Clearly that's a very, very Christian thing, very old, even if it didn't necessarily look the way you see it in Protestant churches today, but anyway. All right, so as I said, this piece is worn by all ranks. I will actually do the vesting as we go so you can see each piece. I did this with the media when we actually walked through all of it. So this is my inner cassock. This is in some sense my daily wear. We didn't talk about this a whole lot when we talked about the ranks of clergy, whenever that was, but it's Orthodoxy 101. We talk about that. So been a little while even if we did, but this is my daily wear. That is like a formal piece that's worn in church if the bishop is present, that kind of thing. Otherwise, you often see priests that wear just a vest, which is sort of like a shortened form of that doesn't get in your way with the long floppy sleeves. But this is also pretty much all ranks of clergy wear this inner cassock. So you've seen here our readers will wear this, and just this. Our deacons are given to wear the outer cassock so that you'll see when we have deacons serving here, they wear that, and of course bishops wear all of the things. So, all right, there's a prayer here you can read. I won't do that. Well, maybe I will. My soul shall rejoice in the Lord, for he has clothed me with the garment of salvation, with the robe of gladness, as he accompanied me as a bridegroom. He set a crown on me as a bride. He has adorned me with a raiment. Make the sign of the cross over it and kiss the cross. You'll notice that is a common element of everything that is done in this, is kissing the crosses on the things. They all have one somewhere on them. In the case of the stole, there's many, many crosses. But they all have one cross at least somewhere on them. So you can see, very plain, right? Other than the little bit of fringe at the bottom and the big old cross on the back, there's not really much here. All right. I'll talk while I'm doing this about the orarion very briefly. So theoretically, there's not really much difference between a stole and an orarion, but we use the words very differently in the Orthodox Church. The orarion is used to describe the lower clergy that have the thing that drapes somewhere around shoulders or their chest. Although, if you notice, this is two pieces of fabric, or one long piece that's been buttoned together. I think it's pretty safe to say, and I know that this sometimes happens, that when you become a priest after being a deacon, you take the one that was over your shoulder and you just put it around your neck and button it down, right? It's uncommon to do that because it doesn't drape as nicely as these ones that are a little more tailored, but that's effectively what it is, right? It's just been made to look a little nicer. So, but we do use that word orarion specifically, usually for the more minor rings. Yeah, you could call this an orarion, but it would be confusing to most people. We call it, like I said, epitrachelion, which means, what, does anyone have any idea what that word means? Epitrachelion? Can you guess by the pieces of it?
Epi has to do something with it being in the center.
Close. Epi means around. Trachea?
Oh. Around the neck.
Around the neck. It is the around the neck. Yep. The Greek is the first one, the Slavic is the second, the English is the third there. Epitrachelion, epitrachel. The Slavs tend to just kind of lop off the end of the Greek word. And then the sort of English translation. I don't really know what stole properly means in English.
Make things sound epic. Make things sound
Yeah. But this is the piece that, like I said, I mean, this is what you see on almost pretty much every Christian group has some form of a stole. It just probably looks a little different than ours. But the last thing I want to say about the orarion, so the icons you can see here, it's draped just over the one shoulder, but you will see sometimes, if you have, in the Slavic tradition, a high-ranking deacon, or in the Byzantine world, just any deacon, it's worn wrapped around and then draped over the shoulder. So it kind of slashes across once and then is over. It's basically twice as long, it's twice as much fabric as the one that just goes once over. So in the Slavic world, we'll call that sometimes a single orarion and the other a double orarion, because it is literally twice as long. I don't really know what the distinction there comes from. My understanding is that the Slavic world wanted there to be more ranks because it was tied to government pay, so they're like, just chop it in half and give them the first half and then later give them the second half. But for all I know, there could be more to it than that. Yeah. All right, so the epitrachelion. This is worn by priests and bishops. It's my height. So I'll say the prayers I put it on. Blessed is God who pours out grace upon his priest and myrrh upon his head. It runs down the beard of Aaron, even to the border of his robe. So you'll notice it's the same fabric. It's all fancy, matchy. And here I've got the symbolic meaning. It's the grace, right, that the prayer called out, right, flowing down. And also, I've heard it said that it's supposed to be symbolic of the cross that Jesus is. We've got a lot of crosses on it, and it's not exactly heavy, but it does weigh on my neck, I guess, in some regard. And the important thing about this is this must be worn by the priest whenever sacraments are done. So whether they're here in this church or elsewhere, this will always be worn when a sacrament is being done. So if there's confession to be heard, the priest will put on at least this. If there's a wedding to be had, at least this. If there's whatever else, baptism, funeral, at least this. This is the piece that must be worn. You'll hear stories sometimes, especially in places that were very trigger happy in arresting clergy, that in prison camps sometimes, when the sacrament of confession or even funeral rites or something were to be performed, clergy would grab a piece of fabric that could be put around their neck, so they would at least have the stole on, and then they would treat that as their stole and keep it all separate and not used for other things. But it is the thing that must be worn whenever sacraments are done, and that's why I have the one always on the iconostas, because I do a bunch of daily services here, and it's not uncommon to have people come in and want to do confession, and now there's no reason for me to go into the altar to get vestments, right? Because the altar is a place we don't just go randomly, right? So I don't need to go in there now because I have that hanging there. It's very easy to grab and just do whatever I need to do. So that's why that's there. It's more of a Byzantine practice to have it hanging there, but it's practical, so I do it. And it means it can change with colors.
Yeah.
All right. Zone is the Greek word. I don't know what the Russian word is. I'm sure there is one, but I don't care enough to find it. Belt is what we call this because we're not silly. It's a belt. Blessed is God who girds me with strength and makes my way blameless. He makes my feet like hinds' feet and sets me secure on the heights. Literally, this just holds things in place, right? You will find that with a lot of these, there's a very practical element to them and why we wear them, and then there's kind of the more theological side of what it is to also represent. So they put here mission responsibility, the cleanliness that we must gird ourselves with. I honestly, I think all of that's mostly just secondary to the fact that it holds things in place, as belts do. I don't know that there's much more to say there. That's what it is. All right. Does anyone know what epimanikia would mean? Can you guess a little bit of it from the other one?
Around the wrist.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Greeks, for very creative words, or cuffs as we call them in English. This is actually something that isn't foreign to Western culture. A separate cuff used to be a thing, literally to hold back whatever you have underneath. We've long since moved past that in our modern culture. We build our cuffs into our shirts, if we even have them.
Yeah.
Most of the time we don't really have much for cuffs, but anyway, that's what this is. It's just literally to hold the fabric back, especially because I have a lot of things to be grabbing, like the gifts, and it would be really awful to be dragging some giant sleeve through all of that, right?
Yes.
So this makes sure that doesn't happen. And we go through lots of steps to make sure that all the fabric is very well tied away. So, thy right hand, O Lord, is glorified in strength. Thy right hand has shattered thine enemies, and the greatness of the majesty does overthrow thine adversaries. There's one for each hand, so there's a prayer for each hand. It's all lots of fiddly. You'll notice there's no zippers or Velcro. So very old school ways of keeping everything together and on me in a way that won't just fall off. It does a good job, but it does mean I'm sitting there. Yeah.
Never went away.
Thy hands have made and fashioned me, give me understanding, that I may learn thy commandments. In the OCA, Metropolitan Tikon has asked that whenever sacraments are performed, unless there's an emergency or some particular reason, that cuffs also be worn with the stole. So I don't have those hanging up there, but you'll notice that when I do confessions most of the time on Saturdays, I simply take off some of the pieces from Vespers and I keep the cuffs and the stole on. When we did the baptism here not that long ago, I had cuffs on. When we do, actually Vespers in general doesn't call for cuffs usually in the Byzantine world. They will not wear cuffs for most of those things unless you are wearing all of these like you see me right now. But our Metropolitan has asked us to, so we do. I don't know that I could give you a great reason why, but when your bishop asks you to do something, or a brother bishop, that's what we do. All right, these next ones I can't show you because I don't have them. They are awards. So the epigonation, anyone guess what that is? Around the something, right? It's a good guess. Around the waist, which is actually interesting because it's not really worn that way in modern times, but implies that it may have at one point in time. So this is a big distinction between the Greek and the Slavic worlds, what these pieces of fabric mean and if they even exist. Everything until now has been the same. A Greek priest would vest exactly the way I have so far, or a Slavic, or a Romanian, or a Bulgarian, or a Mexican, or a Japanese, right? Anywhere around the world, so far, everything I'm wearing is the same between priests. But at this point in time, we have a distinction. So in the Greek tradition, because that's the slightly easier one, the diamond is worn only by those priests that have been blessed to hear confession. So coming from a time and place where priests were plentiful enough that you could have some that were in a parish and not blessed to hear confessions, and others that were, that was your distinction to know that this person is. In modern times, my understanding is it's very uncommon to not simply grant that immediately, because there's just not a lot of priests available. But theoretically, I have been told that it does happen sometimes, especially if you're going to like a cathedral or something where there might be 3 or 4 priests, that it's possible only 1 or 2 of them might be blessed with the epigonation and the others would not. In the Slavic world, they don't have any particular meaning like that. Yes. They are simply awards for years of service, right? Yeah, meaning there's no like, because I have this, I can now do something else, right? They're just purely awards. You've been doing it for a long time. Good job, great. Here's a little thing to show our appreciation. And then a little bit later, the same thing. Here's even more appreciation. Thanks. You're great. It's the same shape for the one, the diamond. The other one is a big rectangle. I believe the politza is the one that matches the epigonati on the diamond, and the nebedrenik is the big rectangle. Theoretically, I've been told that the nebedrenik is also representative of the shield, and the politza is a sword. I think they're on the wrong hands for most people, but whatever. I've also heard that the nebedrenik was used as a literal bag at one point in time, that at the end of liturgy, collecting up the remnants, it would be taken out, and the hungry would come to the doors of the church, and you could take out and feed those in need from there. And you still see maybe a remnant of that in some places of the world where it's very common to have people begging outside of churches specifically. I think that's just maybe common sense these days because churches give things out. But theoretically, at least, that's one guess as to where that came from. To my knowledge, there's not any definitive anything about that for sure, but that's our thought about those two. I have not been blessed as a relatively young priest to wear either, so I don't have anything to do at this point in time. Father George, I believe, has the politza, the diamond. He does not have the nebedrenik. So when I say our, I'm talking Slavic. That would include OCA, Rokor, and then most of the smaller Romanian, Serbian, Bulgarian are going to be at least similar. There may be some variations as to when exactly they give one or the other, but generally speaking, they are usually going to be just awards for years of service. You'll hear sometimes archpriest. So archpriest has been given the fancier golden cross instead of the silver cross, and I believe also the politza. And then at some point down the line, if you're like a dean or if you've been a priest for a really long time or whatever, then you'll get the other one. So if you ever see here in the Bay Area, if you go to something and you see one of the older priests like Father Basil Rhodes, Father Stephen Mahalik, our dean, Father Lawrence, right, you'll see they have all of the things on because they've been priests forever. Yeah, we'll get there. But of course, like I said, I have not been given any of those, so I don't have anything to do now except put the last piece on, which is the Phalonian in Greek, or Phalon. We don't really have a word for this in the Orthodox Church. Like I said, in the Byzantine or in the Western world, I believe alb would be the most appropriate word, but we don't use that. We say stole, we say cuffs, we say some of these other things, belt. I've never in my life heard anyone refer to this as an alb, but it is what it is. So Phalonian, I believe, in America is more common than Phalone, but that's that. Thy priest, the Lord, shall be clothed with righteousness, and thy saints shall rejoice with joy, always now and ever, and unto ages of ages. What is the difference between the Byzantine and the Slavic Phalonians?
Collar?
Yeah, why?
Well, I know that you were saying in the Slavic tradition, the collar is higher so that it can be any priest technically wearing it. You're not paying attention to who the person is.
So this is my own opinion based on what I have read and seen. In the Greek world, there is a form of this higher collar used in the monastic rite, in monathos. You'll see they have a raised collar like this. My guess is that Russians received the monastic bishops that were sent from Greece, who were their bishops for a long time, and that this was the style as monastics that they were used to, and that became standardized across all of Russia. And yes, like I said, the practical purpose behind it is that it blocks me, right? It doesn't matter who I am. I'm standing with you, facing the same direction you all are, so you see the back of what I'm wearing, not me, because you're not here for me, right? You're here for God, who, standing at our high place, if you remember, in the back of the altar, is the one looking back, right? Unlike in the Protestant or Catholic worlds where the priest is the one looking back, for us, only the high priest himself, Christ, looks back on all of the people, right? That's who we're all here for, not me. I don't really matter. It could be anyone. Well, you at least have been here for a transition. You know that the things will go on regardless of who's standing up there, as long as someone is standing up there, right? So, all right, this is the full form as used in liturgy, and pretty much just liturgy. The rest of the time, I would not wear the belt, nor would I wear the stacarion, and I wear just the cassock, because I've been asked to, the cuffs, and the epitrachelion or stole most of the time, and in a few points in the service, I put on the phalonion. Most specifically, the phalonion is put on during those other services when I'm going through the doors. If I'm going through the doors for something, then this goes on. So if you pay attention to Vespers tomorrow night, you'll see that whenever I'm just kind of hanging out back there, it's off. But when we're going to do an entrance, or when I'm going to come out and do the dismissal at the end, or whatever, then it's put on, the doors are opened, and at some point I go through them with this on.
Almost like a shield.
Sure. It's also, so that same basic arrangement, cuffs, stole, and phalonion, is worn for the sacraments as well. So for weddings, funerals, baptisms, receiving of chrismations. Not the whole thing. Not the whole thing. The cuffs, the stole, the phalonion. So not the, so many names. Not the stacarion, not the belt. Although sometimes you will see, if people are doing a baptism Sunday morning, they'll fully vest and do like proscomedia or something before the baptism and then come out fully vested for the baptism. But if it's another time, another place, whatever, there's no reason to be fully vested. The only exception to that I can think of is on the 2 vigils for the Feasts of the Cross, and maybe one of them on during Holy Week, I want to say, when we process out with the cross, which has been on the altar for all of Vigil and is only brought out at the very end, and again at the end of Holy Thursday, Holy Friday, when we bring out the oh gosh, I'm blanking on all the words now. The cloth with Christ laid out on it. I'll think of the word in a few minutes probably. In that case, we go through all of Vigil vested normally, and then I just have to very quickly take everything off, put it all back on, all of it back on, and be ready for that last little bit. All right. You are right about there being some additional things. These are mostly bishop things. So the sakos and omophorion are the 2 additional pieces that bishops wear. So if you look at the icon right there of St. John, or I don't know, there's probably others somewhere in here. You'll note that he's got that piece of cloth draped around his neck. That is his omophorion. Every hierarch is depicted with that. So even on some of the very old hierarchs, so much longer ago, like I'm not sure They all always have the omophorion on. That's how you know that it is a bishop. In fact, we even call a church under the jurisdiction of a particular bishop, we will say it is under the omophorion of bishop so-and-so, or archbishop, or metropolitan, or patriarch, or whatever. It is the sign of his authority. It is what is processed out during liturgy right before the gospel is read. We process out his omophorion. We take it off of him and process it out to show the authority of Christ, right, leading out the gospel, right? There's technically two forms, one that is much longer and looks almost more like this, raised version, that's worn during the first part of the liturgy, and then there's a shorter one that's worn kind of in the second half because there's more things to be doing and you don't need more fabric flopping around. The sakos, so if you look at what I'm wearing, this has a very particular look. If you look at the icon of the hierarch, it does not look like this, right? That is a late Byzantine vestment that he is wearing, the sakos, which we've maintained to this day. It is very similar, practically, to this, but it's basically done the way that the Western alb is. It is long and short and back, and has things, well, it has sleeves, but it folds over the top. So you'll see in the vesting of a bishop, which is usually done out of the middle, the subdeacons will come forward and sort of clamshell over him this thing and then fasten it up either side and under his arms. And that's where you get some of the jingly bells, right, on the bishop. If you look, however, on many of the much older hierarchs from longer ago, again, like the three hierarchs there, who are the three hierarchs? Basil the Great, Gregory the Theologian, and John Chrysostom, yeah. They're wearing what looks like this, but with an omophorion over the top. So the sakos didn't develop until much later. The distinction between priest and bishop for a long time was only the omophorion. And sometimes, although we don't really do it in the Slavic world, to my knowledge, but in the Byzantine world, you'll sometimes hear of a bishop serving as a priest. And he will wear priest vestments, like which you see me wearing right now, but with an omophorion over the top, and will serve as the only celebrant. So, for example, when I was a child, I was in an Antiochian mission, and there were a few times where we were far away from any other church, and the priest was sick or something, and so the bishop would come and serve, and he would serve as a priest, because we weren't doing a full hierarchical service. We weren't vesting him in the middle and doing all the big fancy, blessings like they normally do. He was serving liturgy for us, but he was vesting the way a priest does, just with the addition of the omophorion over the top. So it is still valid, which you'll see very consistently across those icons, is a very particular pattern. It doesn't really look like the brocades you see today for the most part. It's an interlocking cross pattern. My understanding is that was the distinction between this form as a priest wears it and this form as a bishop wears it. The bishop one had that pattern. It could be colored, however, but if it was interlocking crosses, it was a hierarchs. If it was anything else, it was a priest. Although my understanding is that varied depending on the patriarch and whatever through time, but very generally anyway. So almost always when we depict the older hierarchs in the church, again, your St. Gregory's and St. John's and whatever, right? We depict them with the older style, basically Phalonian with the omophorion over the top. But for all of the more modern hierarchs, like St. John, I think that's actually another St. John over there. There's a few other bishops over there, St. Tikhon, St. Raphael. We show them in either the fully vested with sakos or the kind of daily wear, which is the more monastic, like cape thing with the omophorion over top. So those are both more modern, though. And then the last thing, the mitre and the staff. So bishops all have this. Sometimes priests who have served for many, many years, in the OCA, I believe the rule right now at least is 50 years, you'll be granted the right to wear a mitre. The difference between a bishop mitre and a priest mitre is whether or not there is a cross sticking up on top. Otherwise, to my knowledge, it is basically identical. I could be wrong. I'm very far off from needing to care about that. So, but I will say no matter what, you will always see a bishop says a cross, a priest never does. There may be other distinguishing features, but that's the biggest one. And technically, a staff is also something that bishops always have and priests may have, although unlike the mitre, which is purely an award, the staff is actually representative of something. It's representative of basically authority. So bishops have it because they're the ruling hierarch of their diocese. Theoretically speaking, if you are in a situation where you have one ruling hierarch and assisting hierarchs, only the ruling hierarch would have a staff that they carry generally. I suppose because hierarchs all have to have an assigned parish, they would have their one parish that they have their staff in, but the rest of the time, the ruling hierarch is the one. So you'll see again, well, actually, we didn't in that one, but I was going to say it's fairly common, but actually only one of the hierarchs over there is depicted with the staff on the top right there. That's St. Tikhon. It is not uncommon, it just so happens that those ones don't, to see the staff depicted with the bishop. Priests that have it are pretty much always abbots. I can only think of one example I've ever seen of a non-abbot, an archimandrite, which is what usually is reserved for those that are abbots or those that are soon to be bishops. So our Bishop Vasily, before he was elevated to be a bishop, he was elevated the rank of archimandrite for, I don't know, a few months or something.
Archimandrite just means the most rewarded priest, or?
So, I mean, kind of. There are degrees of, so there's deacon and archdeacon and protodeacon, and there's priest and archpriest, and that's kind of it for married clergy. But for unmarried, there's the additional layer of
Who decides all that? The bishop, right?
Yeah. The archimandrite. Sorry, there's one more. Igumen. Archimandrite and igumen. I believe that's another instance where the Slavs and the Greeks swap the order of which is which. But those are monastic titles only, so that's why you've never heard them before.
Who is blessed where the Theotokos, can a regular
Bishop.
priest have a bishop only?
Yeah. Only a bishop will have the Theotokos.
Yeah.
So you'll see
Yeah.
John over there, St. John with Theotokos. You will, extraordinarily uncommonly, and I believe only in the U.S. ROCOR permits this as an award, to give a second cross to a priest. The OCA does not do that. I don't think any of the other ethnic Slavic dioceses do, but I believe ROCOR still does.
So just wear 2 crosses?
Yeah.
No.
Yep. Technically speaking, my understanding is that an igumen would be, in the Byzantine rite, an igumen would be like the head of a chapel within a monastery, or maybe within a skete of a monastery. Like there can be some hierarchies within a monastery. It's not. Sometimes they are just a singular thing, but sometimes there's like a little cloister over here and a little cloister over here, and like for Pascha they all come together. But most of the time they kind of function as individuals, and so they'd all be under the archimandrite, with the igumen sort of handling each little group. In the Slavic world, I believe we swap those two, so igumen is actually the top and archimandrite is below. I could be wrong. Again, those are monastic titles. You will never actually have to worry about that. And usually they'll just say, I'm Father so-and-so, and you, hi, Father. Don't have to actually worry about what technical rank they are.
One priest, St. George in Cincinnati, has the Theotokos on his memorial.
That's just, I mean, I have one that has that too.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You'll be wearing that one on November 21st?
Yeah, any of the Feast of the Theotokos where we were blue, which we'll get to in a second here. Yeah, when I wear, I've only got the one set, so that's what I wear.
I love that.
Okay, something else?
So why does I've only seen the patriarchs of Moscow wear that particular white one, so or is that just
It's just what they do.
okay. It's not like.
If you look at the Catholicos of Georgia, he has a slightly different shaped hat. Catholicos Patriarch, I think maybe is what they technically call him. He has a slightly different shaped one. I think it's more like the egg shape that you see sometimes in the Catholic world. I think the Alexandrian Patriarch also has a slightly different shaped hat he'll wear. It's the same basic thing. That particular one is more in line with the monastic head covering, so that is not, to my knowledge, worn when fully vested. He'd wear the mitre. That is his klobuk, which is the technically baby bonnet and veil that will be turned around when they die to cover their face, that they just wear all the time. So if you look at the other, the white right below him, or the three on the other side, that's what those are. Those are monastic thing that bishops, being monastics, also wear.
That's the one.
Yeah. All right. I guess since we're on the topic of awards, there is technically other awards. So you'll notice for me, I only ever open the doors when I'm going through them. Technically speaking, when a bishop is, so like actually when he was Father Vasily and he was here before he was ordained or elevated to be our bishop, Archbishop Benjamin was here for that. And though he was not serving, we still had the doors open the whole time. I think the only exception being right before communion, so that we can still throw everything open and have the chalice come out. But that is theoretically another set of awards. After you've been given all the physical things, then they let you open the doors longer. In the US, I don't think we do that very much, but the monastery of St. Tikhon's, the abbot is always blessed to keep the doors open pretty much the whole time. So if you ever watch a stream from there or something, you'll see, even if there's no hierarch present, the doors are open the whole time, more or less. Although if he's not serving, then they would close like normal. So I guess it just depends on who's serving. All right, so let's talk about colors. I guess there's no reason I have to stay vested, and I'm just going to take them. So I'll take this off, and then I'll slowly take off the other things and talk about the rest of the things here. So colors are not a strictly speaking required element of our church beyond light and dark. If you look at the actual technical rubrics for what to wear when, it only ever says that on this day light, or on this day dark. Do you know when we wear light and when we wear dark? Can you guess?
Dark, I would imagine darkness would probably be more during Lent.
And bright?
After the resurrection.
The rest of the time. Yeah, pretty much. So then why do I have all those bullet points there? Because the West did that, and Russia wanted to do it too. That's the short answer.
Western Rite, or?
No. Russia imported composers from Venice during Catherine the Questionably Great's reign, and they really started looking west for a lot of their stuff, and so she burned a lot of their old music, so we don't actually have a lot of music from before her time in Russia. She imported just a lot of things from there. So that's probably when these colors really came into general use in Russia, and then the Byzantine world has kind of half adopted their use and half not. So really quick here, just to go over them. So white, you've seen me most recently wear at some of the sacraments, funerals, weddings, baptisms, right? We always wear white for that. And then, of course, Pascha, right? It's their resurrectional color, or fully resurrectional color, maybe we can call it. Gold is the maybe slightly less resurrectional color that we wear on Sundays that are not part of Paschaltide itself, as still being resurrectional, as Sundays all are, but not quite being as bright as white, which we do during Pascha and Paschaltide. Effectively, this is our default. Gold is the color we wear when nothing else is prescribed. So if there is a particular saint or something that we want to wear a color for, then we can. Otherwise, gold is our normal. And then the rest of these can vary a little bit as to when they're worn, but green for the Holy Spirit, so Pentecost most regularly. When exactly you stop wearing green varies wildly in different places. Some will wear it through most of the rest of summer, almost until you get to the Apostles' Fast. Some even wear it longer than that. But generally speaking, we wear green at least for Pentecost and for Palm Sunday, because palms are green, and so we wear green. Red is for the Feast of the Cross, so we wore red not that long ago for the elevation, universal elevation of the precious life-giving cross, and we wear it any time that there's a martyr. So our own feast day, we wear red. This is an interesting note, though, where if another parish were to, for whatever reason, celebrate liturgy that day, they would probably just wear gold, because it's not really worth the effort to change over all of the covers, and in some places they even do the lamps and everything on all of the different places. It's a lot of work. It's our parish feast day, so it's a big deal. We make it into a major feast, and so in doing so, we make sure we always wear red, appropriate to her being a martyr. But like I said, most of the world would just wear gold that day, in the Slavic world anyway. Blue for Feast of the Theotokos, the bodiless powers, and also virgins. So there was a little bit of a debate when I got here initially about should it be red or should it be blue for the virgin martyr Christina, and we decided that red made the most sense. My blue, as was pointed out, has an icon of the Theotokos. It's not uncommon to have that on the back, although there are other feasts technically that you could wear blue for. It would be a little silly to have her icon on the back, but that was given to me, and that's what I have. So that's what I wear when I have blue. Purple is the light version of the color that we use during Lent. So in the full Slavic practice, we do black during weekdays and then purple on weekends, so that we're going from a dark color during the week and a bright color on Sundays.
Yeah.
In other parts of so this is where I'm talking about the colors will vary wildly. So in the Byzantine world, they tend to just wear purple all of Lent. They don't make a distinction between weekdays and
Purple's dark and light.
yeah, and some places will even go so apparently at some point in time the practice here was to do purple through all of Lent and then black for only Holy Week. So there's different practices, but purple is the Lenten color. It's very interesting to me that that is probably the most standard of all colors across the Christian world, is that purple is Lent. Pretty much all these other ones, very wildly, gold is not the standard anywhere else to my knowledge, but for whatever reason, purple has remained for everyone as the Lenten color. All right, these other two are very uncommon. Orange, or sometimes kind of like a rusty red color, is used in some places for the Feast of St. Peter and Paul. Although I will say when I was in Japan, the priest sort of giddily showed me his orange vestments that were like traffic cone orange. He was like, yeah, we don't wear these. It's a little much. And they were like very old. I think he said they were like almost 100 years old, that particular set of vestments. So, yeah. And then dark red is used in some places on Holy Thursday, or sometimes just red, but almost like a maroon, like a really deep red, like some of the velvet or red on the chairs here. There is some places I've seen have kind of indicated that what we call purple really should be more like that color red as the color for Lent, and so you will sometimes see the purple vestments that have more of that highlighted on them, and maybe only that the what we think of as purple as like the velvet on top or something like that. But these colors vary wildly, and that's what that last section is to talk about, right? Is that if you go into the Byzantine world, who knows what color they're going to wear? If you've ever been to any of the services around here when a Byzantine clergyman shows up, they'll wear green when everyone else is wearing gold. They'll wear, basically anything but purple when we're doing whatever color we're doing. They really have mostly stuck to this idea that there's light and there's dark. And the only kind of exception to that I'm aware of is you'll see sometimes in the Byzantine world these vestments that are mostly white with kind of an accented color, which my understanding is that is a reservation for archpriests. It's a sort of distinction granted to wear the white with an accent color instead of the bold colors. But again, they just, like we have charts and stuff that show exactly when you wear whatever color, and they're just like, yeah, that's light. So, I'm sure they're more likely maybe to wear blue during Feast of the Theotokos or green during Pentecost or whatever, but they're just a lot less strict about it than we are. So, and all of these, there's some big differences. I don't know if we have any icons out here. Sometimes you'll see icons of, maybe they're back in the altar, now that I'm thinking about it, where the Stacharion of bishop or priest will have red stripes down it. I believe in modern times that's still done in Romania. So you'll see sometimes a Romanian priest that will have red stripes down their Stacharion. No one else does that. So, but you do see that sometimes. And there's other differences. If you ever have the opportunity, I don't know how you would out here, but to go to an old believer parish that has clergy, they have an additional piece that they wear that sort of like hangs off the belt in an interesting kind of way. And there's all sorts of different variations across the world as to, like we've talked about, the lower, tailored around the neck Byzantine versus the straight up like this is. And even things like how low it goes. So I've seen priests that have actually very low fronts that have buttons so that they can fold them up around communion time to keep them out of the way. So they'll go down almost to like somewhere mid-thigh when they're not, when they're down. And then for communion, they'll button it up. Like the size of cuffs can vary, the length of the stole can vary. There's so many different elements of this that are just very, very cultural. So even though I've talked about and shown you these, it could look pretty different at a different church. It's just going to depend on their cultural expectation for what they should look like. And as I put here, that's okay, right? We are one church, of course, but we are all different people coming from different places, and that's okay. That's okay. That's good. Our music doesn't all sound the same. Our iconography doesn't all look identical. Great, fine, right? We're still worshiping the same God. We're still doing it in more or less the same way. We've just adapted it to be a little more representative of that particular culture, and that's fine. So,
I like the little flavors here and there. They said that whatever, like, not decoration, the awards and how they are done, just a little bit different.
Yep.
Makes sense.
All right, once this is all done and the priest is good, there's actually one last step, which I didn't cover. But the last thing is that the priest goes and washes his hands. And there's a whole prayer. I wash my hands in incense and walk about thine altar, O Lord, that I may hear the voice of thy praise and tell thy miracles, so on and so forth. Wash my hands, and then I'm ready to start liturgy. Usually hours in the Slavic rite. Proskomedia, hours, so forth.
Was like the theological or even just the practical reason? I mean, the practical is just because they have clean hands, but is it more just because like you're performing the act with the blessing of clean hands?
Sure. I mean, as the psalm literally says, I will wash my hands in incense and go about thine altar, O Lord, that I may hear the voice of praise and tell the miracles. O Lord, I love the beauty of thy house and the place where thy glory dwells. Do not sweep my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men in whose hands are evil devices and whose right hands are full of bribes. As for me, I walk in my integrity. Deliver me and have mercy upon me. My foot stands on level ground, and the churches will I bless the Lord. So it's a symbolic act of purity to wash your hands free of the cares of the world and to step into the altar then fully vested and ready for the service, washed and clean.
It's also practical because most of the
That's true. We don't really live in a world where we have super dusty, muddy roads that we're walking through to get here, so it's not as big of a deal. I've probably washed my hands once or twice before coming here, just in my normal routine of the day. So we wash our hands a lot more than people did back then, I think. Our hands are not kind of default dirty, but yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's everything I have. So, other questions on any of that? Differences or a particular piece you've seen or anything unrelated at all?
So there were monastics that founded Russia, right? That preached to Russia and preached to the ruler.
Yes.
And that's why Byzantium, since they were monastics, that's how they had the high up collar.
I would not go so far as to say that is definitely why, but that is one thought. The Russians really were very big on doing things the correct way. So we still see some elements of that, like we still sing to our bishops in Greek, even though the entire rest of the service might be Slavonic. We will still say ton despotin kyrie imon kyrie phila tais polati despota, right? Why? Well, because they were Greek, and they liked being sung to in Greek. So we sung to the hierarchs in Greek, and we did everything else in the language that, well, I shouldn't say we, but the Slavs did everything else in the language they spoke. But to their Greek hierarch, they sang it in Greek. And somehow that has maintained until modern days, where now we have very much Slavic bishops, but we still sing to them in Greek. So
Is there any maybe reason why the monastics, like especially with the hat, some of the other wear, like their vestments are a little bit different from the normal clergy?
they're not really different except in, so a monastic priest would have basically all the rules I just said about awards and the different pieces. The only difference would be that they would wear that black hat. It's removed. There are certain points in the service where liturgical hats are put on or taken off, so they would follow that.
Monastic hat.
Yeah, the black with the thing going down the back.
Yeah.
It's,
But besides that, that's like everything else is pretty similar though.
identical, yeah.
No,
Other than, again, the bishop then has the omophorion, but that's a bishop,
the
so.
award hat for priests, the
Mitre?
giant fez.
Oh, you're talking about before. Yeah, so St. John Kucherov over there has the red hat. That's an archpriest thing, yeah. Some priests don't like that and they don't wear them. I was yelled at in seminary, "Where are your awards?" Well, I don't have any yet, so I don't. Yeah. You'll see different colors there, purple, sometimes
Yeah.
red. I don't
Both my priests
I don't have to care about that, so,
The priests at Cincinnati, and they have two different color
yeah.
miters.
Those aren't miters.
Those aren't miters.
No, miters are the jeweled, fancy, shiny ones. Yep.
And then
They often have icons on them, they don't always.
what's that award called? The hat?
A hat?
Just a hat.
Yeah, it's a hat.
Greek name?
I don't know, I think there is, but a lot of people just say hats, yeah.
But that's Father George.
I have heard many a priest say, "Oh, go get my hat." Scoofy is the soft form that you see worn outside of services sometimes, which can take pretty major different shapes in the different cultures. But that's not really what that is. That hard-brimmed felt hat that is worn by archpriests, but is not jeweled like a mitre. Liturgical hat.
Hey. Just heard of that. Now I know.
Yeah.
What is Christ wearing?
He's wearing normal clothes. Sometimes you'll see that particular icon of him standing to our right of the iconostas. He'll be dressed in hierarchical clothing, and so he'll be dressed more like St. John there, as our high priest. Sometimes also the one at the high place will show him dressed similarly as bishop. But yeah, what he's wearing most of the time is just normal clothes, like you see pretty much all of the New and Old Testament figures wearing, right? Various forms of daily wear robes.
It's very hot in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people ask me, "Aren't you wearing all those layers?" I'm like, this is specifically clothing to be worn in deserts and hot places. Like, this one is polyester, which doesn't help, but I mean, this general form is from that. So usually
Are
fine.
there certain vestments that cannot be polyester?
Hmm?
Are there certain vestments that are not allowed to be polyester?
For me, yes, because I hate wearing them.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, no. We're not really in a world where we can be too picky about most of that most of the time. The polyester ones tend to be a lot cheaper, and sometimes that's just what you got to do. Cotton is uncommon. I mean, you'll get cotton or linen for these. The brocades, I have no idea. That's well above my pay grade to care about.
Really expensive though, right?
Linen can be, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're wearing the same clothes that were worn by people in hot places, and they would certainly do linen or cotton there. But up in the mountains of the Slavic lands, you're not exactly looking for something to keep you cool. So you can find fur-lined outer cassocks for use up in the cold places. Yeah.
Are there any, that you can see so far, any changes, investments in an American cultural context that might
That's a good
eventually
question.
at one point become sort of part of the American investment?
Sort of yes and sort of no. So one of the big things right now is that many of our liturgical items in general don't come from here. We don't have workshops that can be profitable, that make lampadas and candle stands and all that kind of stuff. So it's all pretty much imported from Greece or Russia. Well, not Russia these days, but Ukraine or wherever else.
So
And very
OCA is
similarly-
not big enough yet to
So for that type of metal shop, no.
okay.
Or bells, right? All bell foundries. This is all done abroad. To my knowledge, there's no American companies that do any of that. Vestments, you need a lot more of on a regular basis because they wear out much faster than a metal lamp does. So there are a few, but they're almost always people that came from Russia, Ukraine, Greece, whatever, and set up shop here. Through that, certainly it could. I think one of the biggest things, just in kind of general American style, the general American style is that we tend to just kind of mix and match everything in general. So I've talked before about how our liturgics here are mostly Slavic, and then we do the Byzantine Great Entrance, right? When we do we throw the bay leaves and flower petals on Holy Saturday, right? If you go to a Russian church, they will not do that, right? Neither of those things are, what? No leaves. Nope. That's a Byzantine thing. The whole knocking on the door thing, who is the King of Glory? That's a Byzantine thing, right? But they're popular things that people like. They're joyful elements that have been added to the service, and so they're pretty common. The Great Entrance maybe not quite as common in North America, but certainly the leaves and flower petals, pretty common. The knocking at the door, also pretty common.
About the leaves.
Yeah. That's a very joyous part of that day, yeah. I will say, the first time I went to very Russian church, and they did not do those things during Holy Week. It was like, oh, we do the procession, and then we just go inside. Cool. But I mean, that's their practice. Great.
I think
So
I saw rose petals at my church, but on the live stream.
who knows?
I was
Yeah.
not there for that, so.
As long as they're baptism and things.
So in that regard, I mean, yeah, I think there's sort of like I've seen priests wearing all manner of mixed matched vestments. Like pretty much everything I described with the buttons or the giant cuffs or the super long or really short or up or down, like pretty much all those things you can find in the OCA to a certain extent anyway. There are certainly places that like to be a little more like, this is our history and this is the way we do things and whatever, but most parishes don't stick too much to that, especially at a place like this where it's largely convert. And what we do have of cradle is all over the place, Arabic and Greek and, whatever, and Slavic. And I think that's probably more likely to be the trend of just all of the things. The American style is that we do everyone else's style. And it's here.
Or just in the OCA parish.
OCA, yeah, I mean, the OCA tends towards the Russian stuff because that's where we came from, right? So we still have a lot of things that are from that. We use the Russian, melodies and whatnot. Sure, absolutely. But like I said, we will kind of add on some of the fun bits from the other. So the flower petals and the thing at the door are good examples.
Operatic singing was St. Catherine the Great instilled that in Russia.
Yeah, before that they were doing Znameni chant, which sounds very different. We do some of it here during the weekday services. It sounds sort of like Byzantine, but also not at all like Byzantine chant.
There is actually an American Orthodox bell company.
There is for hanging them. Do they make them?
Oh, that I don't know, but I just remember there being
Yeah, I know a guy whose thing is to help you find, hang, and train someone to ring them properly.
okay, but they're not, maybe not making.
No, if it's the one I'm thinking of, he doesn't make them.
I think there's one.
But yeah,
Is that a future project, getting bells out there?
they're very expensive. But I mean, I would love to someday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, it just goes off. Does that, like, for their church over there, the Catholic Church, does that just go off automatically or something?
Yeah, that's all automatic. No,
Okay.
there's no one actually bringing it.
They can get away with it here. 'cause it's-
I know, we actually hear that, they'll,
Yeah.
Now it's like everyone hears it.
Yeah, if we were ringing bells here, we would not ring them every hour like they do. We would ring them for the start and end of our services and on festal days and stuff like that.
Hopefully
But
they're just that loud, but it's still, it almost sounds digital.
it is.
It is digital?
Yeah, you can see the speakers.
oh, really?
There's no bells in the tower.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just speakers.
Oh.
That's pretty common in Orthodox churches too, because it's so expensive and
That's
hard
cool,
to
yeah,
get
I mean,
bells. So
Still sounds.
I've seen churches where you go in the back and you press the button to ring the bells, and then it plays it out of the speakers.
Actually, someone is ringing them.
That's true.
But it's just so hollow.
Yeah, you gotta have the real deal, right?
My
That's
mom's
why we're
parish
at.
has,
a lot less.
has actual bells.
Yeah.
And, that's always really cool.
And it was that guy that came and hung them, and
Oh, so, okay, so.
they already had the bells, but he came and hung them and taught them how to ring them and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't want to get too far off into bells, but it is an interesting world. We do them very differently than the Catholic world.
Bells as a monk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very involved. Yeah, you can find some very neat. If you're interested in that, go look on YouTube, Orthodox bell ringing. You find some
Can't-
very amazing
you know, the
versions
bells,
of
I
it.
mean, can't you like just have some kind of mechanism that would hit it for you?
Yeah, you can, but
Okay.
what's the point in that?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a fun way.
Can't you have an automaton that stands at the altar and
Yeah.
cuts bread for you? Sure, but why?
No one.
In terms of the vestments, are there rubrics or sort of standards for what needs, at some level, what needs to be on the vestment for it to be official? Because you were saying there are differences in how they cut it in size, but you were also saying, well, there's like a cross and in the description, there was also some.
As long as there's a cross
Yeah,
somewhere, and on the stole 6 crosses,
okay.
then you're fine. To my knowledge, there isn't anything else. Sometimes you'll see, I don't think mine do here. I think some of them do. Oh, no, I do. So
Yeah, that.
this can vary. This is very much a cross, but you can see the middle, but it also has the star. This is, I've heard different things said about what this is, but one of the ones that I've heard is that the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, right, is what we say. And St. Paul talks about how, right, Christ comes as the successor of a new line of priests, right, as our high priest, right? And so that's what that's supposed to represent. Sometimes it will just literally be a cross. That's not really accurate. It is, I think, supposed to be this multi-pointed star.
8 points.
So could you technically, with the blessing of the bishop, design?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk to the people that make these, they usually ask you, what you want as, these things, how you want the fringe to be, what types of crosses you want, what pattern you want the brocade to be, if you want it lined or not, and if you want it the same color or a different color. You'll see sometimes that this top section is velvet, whereas the rest will be brocade, or different things where you'll have like a strip of velvet and then a strip of brocade and then another strip of velvet, right? There's all sorts of stuff, so yeah, very much so. There's an Australian company that sells vestments that if you have to ask the price, they're not for you. And one of them is a phelonion that is covered from head to toe in pearls. I cannot imagine the person that would get that and wear that, but I'd be terrified. I'd be terrified of brushing against something and hearing the little.
Those are pretty, they don't break easy.
The Orthodox meme is this Decarion white or blue.
So, generally speaking, though, I believe as long as it's the general shape and it has a cross on it somewhere, I think you're pretty much good. And I made the joke before about Velcro, but actually, you do see sometimes in ones that seem very handmade, you'll see cuffs, for example, that are just Velcro here. And I've even seen a few instances of phelonion that have a zipper up the front. My thought is that must be like elderly priests that can't really put arms up for health reasons, that it's easier to just kind of put it around and zip it up. That's just a guess. I don't know. St. Tikhon's had they call it Elijah's Mantle, where you can donate church goods to, and they'll send them to missions that need them. And we sell all sorts of weird stuff there. Snaps and Velcro and zippers and places that they're not supposed to be. And, yeah. I never saw magnets, actually, but...
All right, well,
But,
to be friends with.
yeah, don't jinx it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then last question, so
Yeah.
in terms of, sort of where you're allowed to wear these vestments,
Sure.
I would imagine that it would be probably frowned upon to just be wearing this out and about, but that there might be special blessings to wear, like for instance at the Fort Ross, liturgy, it was outside, and,
Yeah.
so there was, I was just curious, like,
I mean,
what are the boundaries on where you can wear your vestments?
anytime you're doing a service, no matter whether it's outside or not, I mean, like if I was to go to the St. Eugene summer camp or something, right? It's way out in the woods. I mean, yeah, I'd bring my vestments and I'd serve there, right? Or any of the other various camps around the country, right? They tend to be in non-Orthodox summer camps because we don't tend to have a lot of those. So I'll bring my antimons so I can serve liturgy and bring some vestments to serve it. Other than that, honestly, I've never heard anyone that wanted to just wear them all the time. They're not exactly comfortable daily wear types of things. I've got 4 layers on by the time I'm done, and I'm not really looking to just keep wearing it after liturgy. But, well, for example, like when I take communion to people, I have to wear it around my neck. I have a special little box that I take communion in. It has to stay on me, and I have to be vested the whole time. So I have at least my cuffs and the stole on. And that means if I'm driving somewhere, that's what I'm wearing in the car. I think properly speaking, I'm not actually even supposed to open doors and drive. So other people are supposed to do that, but I don't have a deacon here that can drive me around and open doors for me, so I have to do it. So that would be one instance of just kind of wearing them. I'm not going to, go to the grocery store and stop for a movie and, do other things along the way, but I'm still just kind of out and about. If I got pulled over, I'd have a very confused cop there staring in the window. What are you wearing?
Yeah, that happened to you?
What?
That happened to you?
No.
Oh,
I'm not yet. I mean, maybe. Yeah. Got the beard, so I'm kind of suspicious,
yeah.
You're not a trucker. There's some kind of wizard.
Kind of.
Magic of love. Any other question? Outside of the pay grade.
Yeah, I mean, for some of the things like the hats, that's sort of my answer. It's out of my pay grade. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't had to think about it yet. I'll let you know when I get there.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. That's it. Unless you guys had something.
Yeah.
No, I.
Oh, no, sorry, yeah, no, I don't have any questions.
Without-
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
We will resume where we should have been next week on what was week 5, but will now be week 6. All right. Well, thank you all.